Hello, my friends. Welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness, episode 188. This is about knowing versus believing. When I was contacted by Goodman about a near-death experience story, I was just like, oh, I've read so many near-death experience stories. I wonder what this one's about. And then I started really diving in and could not believe it. This man was shot in the head at point blank 4 times and survived. This resultant near-death experience kickstarted 5 decades of research into the nature of consciousness, developmental psychology, spirituality, and healing for him. And now he's a transformational coach, author, healer, teacher. And I didn't know that the conversation was going to head in this direction, but we ended up talking about the difference between belief and lived experience or embodied knowing. So knowing versus believing. He's really become sort of this wisdom teacher on belief and how we form beliefs and how they serve us and don't serve us. And really his thesis is that the only thing we can ever really know is our very own experience. So super, super expansive discussion. I hope you enjoy it. It was really entertaining. And as you may or may not know, all of my episodes can be found on YouTube, so you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, Cherie Burton. And as always, follow us on Instagram, Cherie.Burton, for some more lively discussions. I'm starting something called a question box. So if you follow me on Instagram or have asked to join my Women Seeking Wholeness private Facebook group, you will have access to this question that I'm going to pose because inquiry is so powerful and it opens. And I want to generate more community-based discussions as we head into these more trying times, lots of people in transition. We can really be a support to each other as we work through these very open-ended, poignant questions related to all things integration, expansion, evolution, and healing. And I hope you love this discussion between Goodman and myself, knowing versus believing. Lion, thank you so much for joining today. I love your name. Is that your birth name, or is that a name that you took on later?
I took it on later. I tell the story that my parents gave me an assumed name. They assumed I would like it when I grew up, and I didn't. So I changed it at 18.
Oh, wow. Well, it's a strong name. It's a strong name. So let's just start with your experience. Walk us through what happened with your near-death experience, and then we'll kind of get into the particulars of what has transpired since.
Sure. I was 24 years old when I didn't know what to do, so I became a traveling salesman. I had graduated with a degree in consciousness studies from the University of Colorado, and nobody was hiring people with consciousness degrees because it was probably the first degree ever granted in that field.
Wow. What a cool degree.
Yeah. I basically gathered everything I wanted to learn about consciousness, psychology, physiology, philosophy, movement and dance, embodiment, and I put it together into a degree program and got them to approve it for my degree. So I was traveling on the road, and because I was a nice guy and I had studied all these things already, I would stop and help people whose cars had broken down or had flat tires, that kind of thing. And I was traveling from Las Vegas to LA through the Mojave Desert, and I came across this guy whose car had broken down, hood was up, he was staring in it as if he knew what he was doing, and he didn't. And I said, can I help you? And he said, the car broke, and I just put $200 into it, and I don't know what's wrong. And he was desperate. And so I said, well, I'm heading into LA. Do you want to ride? And he looked at me kind of funny. He said, yeah, okay. And he came in, and I had this big van that was like an RV. And so he brought his stuff into the van, which was already crowded, and we started traveling together. And I was being nice to him. I gave him some clothes to wear and bought him food and sent him on errands, kind of took him under my wing. And I wasn't much older than him, maybe 4 or 5 years older. And so I grew to trust him, and we were having a good relationship. And he would sleep outside the van at night. I'd sleep inside the van. And the third night out, we were parked out near a reservoir out in the middle of nowhere. And I was in the back of the van moving things around, kind of in this crouch position, trying to make more room for all the stuff that was in the van. And suddenly there was an explosion, and something hit me in the head. And I had no idea what had happened. I looked up, I thought maybe the gas stove had exploded, but it was intact. And then I looked to my left, and there he was with a gun pointed at me from the front seat.
Whoa.
And I thought, I've been shot. And my first instinct was, it's all yours. Like, I thought he was warning me. He wanted my stuff. Good. Take it all. Leave me naked outside in the desert. Fine. All I need is my life. But then he shot again. And I knew that he wasn't just warning me. He was going to kill me. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm going to die. There's no way I can defend myself. I'm stuck in this position. I'm a sitting duck, basically. And so how do I want to die? I want to die clean. I don't want to die with anger or upset. So I went through my past and I forgave everyone that had hurt me, and I asked for forgiveness from all those I had hurt. I was kind of extended back into time in this sort of 5-dimensional way. And he shot again. And the second and third bullets missed me by fractions of an inch.
Wow.
And so now I'm saying, okay, well, it's time to go. I'm returning home. So come on in, God. And so I basically communed with God and was filled with this golden, loving light. And it was radiating out of me. And I was expanded in both space and time. I was outside the van now, looking down at this little scene going, that's very interesting. Look at those two little characters doing that funny thing down there. But I was flowing light to the whole scene, and I was just ready to go home.
Wow. Can I just ask you a really quick question?
Yeah.
We can get into more of this later, but did you have a concept of God? Were you religious? Were you spiritual already? I mean, it sounds like you were doing amazing work, like well, you do have a degree in consciousness. So, I mean, that did help you.
It did. I had studied psychology, spirituality. I'd done many different workshops and trainings, and I had been raised Jewish, but had become more Buddhist spiritual than Jewish. And so I had studied all the religions, in fact, by that time, and had read books on philosophy and enlightenment and consciousness. So I was pretty awake for a 26-year-old. Looking back on it, I realized how naive I was, but for a 26-year-old, I was probably in pretty good shape. But it was like, okay, suddenly I'm going to die. Well, it's my time. It didn't make sense to me because like, how do you know that you're going to die? You don't really, right?
Right.
So I'm expanded out and I'm in this point consciousness filled with love and light, and he shot again. And this time my head was pushed violently to the right and blood started dripping down. And I found myself back in my body, which was odd to me because I thought I should be out of my body. But I'm back in my body. And because I'd studied neurophysiology and the brain, I was sort of looking around. I knew that if the bullet had gone through my head, I ought to be missing something. There ought to be some evidence for damage. And I couldn't find any. So I was a little confused, but I decided, well, if I'm going to die, I want to look in the eyes of my assassin. And so I picked up my head and I turned and I looked at him.
You picked up you physically had to pick up your head.
No, well, I was like in this position, right? So I just lifted my head up and I turned and looked at him, and he freaked out. And he said, "Why aren't you dead, man? You're supposed to be dead."
Wow.
And I didn't know the answer to that question. So I just said, here I am. I was still filled with this love light, expanded consciousness. And he said, "That's too weird, man. It's just like my dream this morning." And I had the same reaction. I said, "What dream?" And he said, "I dreamt that I was shooting at this guy, but he wouldn't die. But it wasn't you in the dream. It was somebody else." And at that moment, I thought, who's writing this script? Wow. I found myself in the middle of a very weird movie that I didn't write. At least I didn't think I wrote. And this strange thing is happening. I've been shot and I'm now talking to my assassin who had a dream about it. So I figured if I could keep him talking, he might not shoot me. And he was jumping around looking outside because he was sure, people had heard we were in the middle of nowhere. Nobody was nearby. And so I said, maybe I'm not supposed to die. And he said, "Yeah, but I shot you. I shot you 4 times, man. You're supposed to be dead." And so I thought, well, just relax, keep talking. Who knows how long it's going to last. That was the beginning of an 8-hour conversation.
Wow.
And in those 8 hours, at one point, I said, "I'm really cramped and I need to stretch." So he let me out of the van. And I walked down toward this pond with him behind me with a gun. And I thought, well, he could shoot me and push me into the water. That's a possibility. But I also felt invincible. I felt I was just filled with this light. And when I turned around to him after washing the blood off my face, he said, what would you do if I handed you this gun? And he kind of held it out to me that way. And I said, I'd throw it in the water. Mm-hmm. And he said, you wouldn't shoot me? I said, no, why would I do that? He said, you're not angry with me? I said, no, I've got my life, you've got yours. And he looked at me and he said, man, you are the weirdest person I've ever met.
Wow.
And I realized, I'm probably the weirdest person you'll ever meet. It's like, so we went back to the van and talked more. I got him to tell his story about his background, why he decided to do it, when he decided to do it. He told me that he had pulled out the gun many times through the 3 days to kill me, but I kept being nice to him. And so he couldn't do it. But then he finally decided the stuff was worth it. And so I thought, okay, the stuff, this van and the stuff it contains was worth it to him to take my life. I thought maybe he could fence it for $5,000 at the most, I thought, okay, well, now I know what my life is worth. It's good to know that, right? It's $5,000. So we continued to talk and he said, okay, I'm going to take you to the hospital. I'm going to take you to the hospital because he started getting caring about me. And I said, okay. And so he'd sort of put stuff around me. I was still in the seated position by this time. And he started driving. And so I had like a half hour, an hour. I was completely out of time and time zone. I don't know how long it was, but he drove for a long time. I was thinking about this weird situation I'm in. And the van finally stopped and the engine turned off. And I knew we weren't near a hospital because there were no bright lights. It was dark. And so he came back and sat next to me with a gun in his hand. And he said, I can't take you to the hospital. I have to kill you. God. And I went, oh, why is that? Get curious when you're in this situation. And he said, because if I take you to the hospital, they'll put me back in jail. And I can't go back to jail, man. And I thought, back in jail. Okay, not only is this a crazy person with a gun, it's an ex-con with a gun. I kind of raised the level of, and so that's when we began talking, and the next scene happened. So we were trying to find our way through this dilemma that if I went to the hospital, they'd catch him, turn him in, put him back in jail, but yet he cared about me. And so we negotiated for hours trying to find our way out of this situation. And we finally made an agreement. And the agreement was I would not turn him in and he would never do anything like that again. And we shook on it. And so we drove to a place that he knew. He got out of the van. I followed him. He sort of got his stuff. Somewhere in his stuff was a black gun, And I shook his hand and said goodbye. And he kind of looked at me weird and said, okay, goodbye. And I drove myself to the hospital where the doctor said, you had 2 bullets graze your skull. You're a lucky man. And I said, well, I'm blessed. I'm a blessed man.
Wow.
And I kept my promise and I believe he kept his.
And you never heard from this individual, ever heard what happened to him or?
No, I kind of followed him psychically for about 5 years. I check in every once in a while, like, how is he doing? Because we were certainly linked psychically. And it seemed to me, and again, who knows, it seemed to me that he had gotten his life together. He got married. He started having kids. He created a life for himself. Wow. But I don't know for sure.
That is amazing. They need to make a movie about that.
Well, as a matter of fact, a movie has been made about that based on my story. It's called A Shot in the Light. It was a short film that won best film at a film festival. And if you read my story on my website, liongoodman.com, it's Lion's near-death story. At the end of the story, you get a link to the movie so you can actually watch the movie.
Fascinating. Yeah. I don't even know what to do with that.
Well, we've all had traumatic experiences, right? You've had yours. Your guests have had theirs. The audience members have had theirs. It doesn't matter what the trauma is. Trauma has a deep impact on us and it changes our life one way or the other. This one happened to change it for the positive. I got grounded. I got a job. I built a career. So the opposite of most people who become spiritual after a near-death experience, I actually became grounded. I was already spiritual, so I became grounded. and built a life,
Yeah, that's what's so unusual about it, because as I'm listening to you, it's like, okay, you were kind of prepared for this in the sense that, uncommonly so, you were able to be present and grounded and aware and compassionate. And then I want to dive into the God thing because I've read so many near-death experiences. My kids just laugh at me. I've probably read every book that I know of. And it seems there's a lot of universal themes, love being it's just all about love. Like, that's it. Like if you just could whittle down the purpose of life and the afterlife, it's just all about love. So as you've had some time, obviously, in space around this, has that experience with God as the God of your understanding, maybe take us through how it's morphed since that time. That's why I had asked you what your beliefs were about God prior to that, because consciousness makes God really big to me. When I went from a religious context of God, was very, singular and personal and father figure and all of the things. And I dove into the divine feminine and had a conceptual mother God. And then when I dive into consciousness, it seems bigger, yet not. So we can get to like that conceptual stuff. But for you, what was that arc? What was that journey of coming to understand God from before, during, and after?
That's been a quest for my whole life. So this was a particular incident along that quest. There have been lots of incidents, lots of workshops and trainings and enlightening experiences and hard experiences and suffering and joy and everything in between, right? So my quest was always to understand what is the nature of human nature, what is the nature of human consciousness, and what is the nature of life and the universe and everything, right? That's been a quest. And I think that is a quest. First of all, it's an endless quest because there's always more to know. Secondly, it's very entertaining and very educational. And third, I don't think there are any answers. I think even the belief that there are answers is just a belief. That the universe is so complex and we as humans are so complex and we're infinitely complex. And so trying to understand us as simple or these are the rules that will work is kind of a fool's errand. But by understanding beliefs themselves, because that's what I discovered, was that beliefs are the infrastructure of human consciousness. They're the pieces we put together as infants, trying to understand the patterns we're seeing and experiencing. And then we put them together and solidify one aspect of our universe at that moment. And then we solidify another one and another one and another one. And this is how we build the sense of self. It's how we build a personality. It's how we build our psychology and our relationships and our life. So by going down to that deep layer of understanding how beliefs work, then the question is, what do you believe? And my answer is, what do you believe? Because your beliefs are what structure who you are. My beliefs are what structure who I am. And if I tell you what to believe, which is what the churches do, we're robbing you of your own discovery process. We're robbing you of the most precious thing to me, which is exploration and finding out who I am. Who am I is the best question you can ask. And if you find an answer, that solidifies it, right? If you keep open, then you get to keep experiencing all new things.
I love it. It's so interesting, right? That, I've been thinking lately about whatever you believe is true for you. Because our beliefs are, and I know you're an expert on beliefs. So when I want to go into that, I started with the big question, what do you believe about God? That I think it was Wayne Dyer who was like, there's beliefs and then there's knowing. And can you talk a little bit about embodied knowing versus beliefs and how that has kind of, I guess, informed the work you're doing now?
Absolutely. In fact, that's where I wanted to go next. So what can we count on? What can we actually know? The only thing we can really know is our experience. And if you start with facts and scientific evidence and statistical analysis, that's kind of an outside-in approach to understanding who we are. It's interesting. It keeps us entertained and educated. But your experience is how you know everything for you.
Yeah.
If I share my experience with you, if I tell you a story about my experience, as I just did, you get to have a little taste of my experience. But you didn't experience it. You experienced your experience, and that's what you know. Now, the conclusions you come to from your experience, those are where beliefs come in. So a child experiences trauma. Dad beats the kid up. Children want to make meaning of it. They want to understand, why did this happen to me? Because a child expects to be loved and cared for and nurtured and held and protected. That's what we come in knowing we want, need, and deserve. And then something happens from the outside. We have a hit. And then we go, what happened? Why did that happen? And the meaning-making part of our mind and our brain are what fixes the reason it happened. Because if we know the reason, then we don't have to experience it again.
And that creates more safety if we go into a mental type of,
Right. And it's a learning. It's like, okay, don't do that again. So what did I do just before Dad beat me? I said a bad word. Okay. So the learning is, don't say bad words, or you're going to get beaten. So I'm just going to shut down that part of me so that thing doesn't happen again. Now I've got a belief. Now, also, most children blame themselves for whatever happened. They don't say, wow, Dad's a beast and he really needs some help. He should have taken parenting 101 before he had me, So children make it about themselves. So there must be something wrong with me that caused this bad thing to happen, whether it's rape, trauma of any kind, an accident. It doesn't matter. We make things out of it. We make stuff up. And then we fix on that and hold it, and it becomes part of who we are, usually a limitation, because all beliefs are limiting.
I like that. Just like, that's so all-encompassing. All beliefs are limiting. So keep going. That's such a truth bomb.
Yeah, because beliefs are a fixing of reality and saying this is what's true. But that's only partly true, because it's a big universe. I mean, even if you state a fact like that is a cat, you've taken this incredible multidimensional creature with its own personality and its own beingness, and you've fixed it with a label. Now I don't have to pay attention to its multidimensionality and infinite beingness. Yeah,
you've just limited the scope and expansion of that person or thing.
Right, and you've limited your own experience. So this is what beliefs do. They limit our experience. So when someone tells you what God is and how you're supposed to act in order to be good with God, they're limiting your behavior. Now, this is old technology. It came from long ago when parents wanted to protect their children, and so they told them what will keep them safe.
Yeah.
And that's...
So it had a good intention. It feels like there's good intentionality around a lot of false programming and conditioning and belief structures.
Yeah, and it's important to understand the other side too, which is children are eager to take on the beliefs of their parents, because one of the primitive instincts is that if I become like you, you will like me, and therefore you won't throw me out to the wolves. So we take on beliefs of our parents in order to become like them, in order to align with them, so they will take care of us and we won't die. This is the core programming of our human nature, right? And when you understand that, you can go and say, okay, why did I believe that? Oh, I believe that to align with my parents, or I believe that because if I didn't believe that or do that, I would get hurt, beaten, or killed. Even belonging, which is one of our deepest instincts, like how do I belong to the troop? Well, monkeys and apes, if you get pushed out of a troop as a monkey, you're basically dead meat. You're going to get picked off and eaten by a predator. So this is how deep it goes, is I have to belong to my troop. And who's your first troop? Your family. What do I need to do to belong?
I absolutely resonate with everything you're saying on such a deep level, just because of my own experience. I just saw a quote. I wish I could give the right reference to who said it, but it was something along the lines of, and some philosopher is like, isn't it interesting and fascinating and coincidental that every child, their religion is true? Like their parents, they believe what their parents' religion was, and then they're all true.
It's not a coincidence. It's how the brain and mind work.
Yeah, and it makes so much sense. But the complexities that get tied in with, especially when it comes to God, especially when those belief structures were about your own salvation, let's just say, your own livelihood. So you talk about the herd mentality and breaking away from that, but even deeper, like your afterlife, your eternity, you're ousted, you're abandoned, you're ostracized if you don't believe these things. Right. And so it's a psychic terror. It's almost like a deep terror.
It's terror of death. I'm going to be abandoned. I'm going to be alone. I can't take care of myself. I'm going to die. That's the terror right there. You've heard of Stockholm Syndrome, of course, right? That's when someone gets captured by terrorists and 2 weeks later they're spouting the beliefs of the terrorists. And that's because the mind is looking for, how do I survive? And if I align with these people, they won't kill me, right? So it turns out that all children suffer from Stockholm Syndrome. They could be killed at...
You're like blowing my mind right now. Okay.
Every child is in danger of death. And they have to take on the beliefs of those people, they're the big people that could kill them in order to not be dead. And you see this in animals too. They take on the characteristics and the behavior of the parents, right? It is a survival mechanism.
I feel blessed that I have incredible parents. They were raised very differently, religiously, and all kinds of, their family dynamics were very different. What would you say to a person who feels like, oh my gosh, my childhood was utopian, and I don't have any, this is my husband kind of like, we could get him on here. He literally has no, there's human things going on. He knows his parents aren't perfect and he would have wanted things differently in some respects, but he cannot target anything in terms of beliefs being transferred to him or, those kinds of things. What would you say to someone who didn't get a lot of programming? Or is that unavoidable? Because I keep telling him, you got programmed. So when you said all children have Stockholm Syndrome, I'm thinking, oh, wow, I need to tell Jeff that.
So the thing is that if you align with your parents and they like you, there's nothing wrong. It's cool. That's good. We're good. We have the same beliefs. We have the same behaviors. I copy you. It's so where's the problem? The problem's only when you grow up and you face a different world because you're a different person. You're an adult now, and the old patterns don't work anymore. If the old patterns work, why bother changing them, right? Many beliefs are useful. Beliefs aren't true or false, right or wrong. They're useful or not useful in a particular circumstance. So the belief that you had as a child doesn't necessarily help you as an adult. There's some beliefs that work all the time, like look both ways before you cross the street. That is a useful belief, not just for children, but for us as adults, right? That keeps us safe. So why bother changing that? You don't want to change that one because you get hit by a bus, right?
Yeah.
Look, it's only the problematic beliefs that we need to work on and change.
Yeah. The word indoctrination is coming to me. What do you have to say about that? Let's talk about religious indoctrination versus maybe what you experienced. You had a level of indoctrination coming into that experience, even getting that consciousness degree. And I don't know, indoctrination may not be the right word for that, but
it's exactly the right word because doctrine is a belief, and indoctrine means a belief is put into you. So that's what indoctrination means. So we are indoctrinated by the people around us. But again, we want to be, right? It's not just now. Some indoctrination is not what we wanted. Your parent says you're a piece of crap and you don't deserve to live.
Yeah,
you're a waste of food. That's indoctrination at the deeply negative part of the self, right? So that's indoctrination, or religious indoctrination. This is who God is. This is what you need to do to please God. And if you don't, you're going to go to hell or go to a bad place. But everything is indoctrination. The media indoctrinates us. Drink this drink and you'll be happy. Eat this hamburger and you'll have a whole bunch of friends. Right. So this is just part of human psychology. So there's some beliefs that come from inside of us, like I'm a bad person because this thing happened to me. And most of our beliefs come from indoctrination from outside of us.
I was just searching for this quote. I had a big awakening in 2019 summer after going to this amazing retreat with some really enlightened women. And anyway, when the retreat was over, I was asking for signs because I could feel some of my indoctrination unraveling. And so I asked God, please send me a sign and let me know that this is just not false stuff, false doctrine, whatever. Because that was definitely a fear that was instilled in me, is that I was going to attach to false doctrine or get deceived or all kinds of things. But what was happening is my soul was...
Our doctrine is right. Don't fall for any of those other doctrines. Right?
Yes.
That's really the key.
Yes. Yeah. So I was with a couple of the ladies. We had some time to kill before we traveled back. And this was in North Carolina, and there was a little shop that had this big sign. It was a bookstore, actually, and it had a big handwritten sign, and I actually took a picture of it, and it's in my Google Docs, so I just pulled it up. This is by William G. Sumner, who lived between 1840 and 1910. It said, "Doctrines are the most frightful tyrants to which men are ever subject, because doctrines get inside of a man's own reason and betray him against himself. Civilized men have done their fiercest fighting for doctrines. If you want war, nourish a doctrine."
Perfect. Oh my God, I couldn't have said it any better myself.
Yeah. But yet they're benevolently gifted to us.
Most are
presented to us. And so it's hard to separate the love that's given with those.
Good point. That's a really good point, because we want you to survive. So if you believe this, you will survive. That's love, right? If you behave this way, you will survive and you will thrive. That's good. That's a loving thing. If you are this kind of person, we will like you more. That's a loving thing. It's like the child wants love and attention. What do I need to get it? And a lot of core beliefs come from that question. When a child is feeling abandoned or rejected or alone or dismissed, they ask the question, what do I have to do to get my parents' attention and love? And that forms a behavior pattern that lasts a lifetime. Oh, if I become a helper, they will smile at me and approve of me. If I get good grades, they will smile at me and approve of me and pat me on the head. If I take care of my little brother, they will pat me on the head and love me. And
if I get baptized.
There you go.
Which was what was presented to me at age 7, turning 8. At 8 years old, that's just what you do.
Yeah.
That's just how you belong to the tribe. That's just what God wants you to do. Exactly. If you don't do this, then, but yet the way that parents that are in, and I'll just say my religion of origin is Mormonism, and it's a beautiful religion in many, many respects. But you always see parents posting things like, my son Johnny chose to be baptized and he's like 7, turning 8. And it's like, of course he did. Of course he did. Bless his sweetheart. And that didn't mean that he didn't feel the spirit himself, and that he didn't feel good. And I'm not dismissing that, but would you expect him to say no?
Of course not.
What would that mean?
It takes a tremendous amount of courage and will to say no to your parents. In fact, one of my favorite sayings is that you begin to grow into an adult when you are willing to disappoint your parents.
Oof. I mean, I'm 53 and I'm still don't want to disappoint my parents. It runs deep.
It does.
Wow. Well, I feel like I could just talk about every secret of the universe with you.
You could, and I would enjoy it.
So as we kind of I want to come back to your story and how that shaped, what you already had this consciousness degree, you had this amazing experience where you felt really invincible and full of love and grace and all the words that you can't even put into it, right? This golden light that you talked about. And then you obviously had to recuperate. And was it kind of like a death rebirth sort of thing for you, or did that come later? Or
no, absolutely is a death rebirth, because I knew I was dead person. I knew I was going to die. So there was no question in my mind. It's just like, how do I want to die? So suddenly being alive, I felt like I reincarnated without having to go through the diaper stage.
Oh, the dark night. So I do have a question, because there was another phrase that I was thinking about when you were telling your story, that I go in and out of not understanding or not believing, or believing and not believing. And that is divine intervention. Because as I hear your story, I'm like, that is just, there are some stories you hear where you're like, okay, something else was intervening. Is that how you look at it, or what are your beliefs? What are your thoughts on divine intervention?
So let's start with the facts. I was a sitting duck. I couldn't move. He was maybe 12 feet away. His hand was propped up with a gun. And later he told me he was rated an expert marksman in the Army. Now, with those facts, what do we do with the fact that 2 bullets missed me and 2 bullets just grazed me? That's a hard one to fathom. And he was intending to kill me. Or maybe he was not sure, but whatever the force was that intervened or that shifted it that way, we could call that divine intervention. We could call it physics. We could call it whatever we wanted. That's a belief, is whatever we ascribe, the meaning we make of it, to what happened. And that's what we do. We want to ascribe meaning. Yeah. And the divine is an ultimate. It's a great way to ascribe meaning. Well, if I don't know what it is, it's God, or it's Allah. Allah's right. Will be.
Well, most of us are, anytime there's a mystery or a question, we do assign it there.
Right. That's right.
Because it is a mystery. It's like, what?
Yeah. The question is, what's the alternative? I like to say, I love the mystery. It's not knowing I can't stand. And when you can stay in the mystery, when you can hang out in the mystery, that's the awe moment. Like, oh my God, that's incredible. And that feeling of awe is part of the precious humanity and possibility that we have. So why fix it into something else and leave the sense of awe? Right.
That lands really beautifully. I'm glad you phrased it like that. It's like, I lost my keys, pray, and sometimes I find my keys and sometimes I don't. And then I'm like, or like, there's so many scenarios that you could paint of like, turn this nth degree and I would have had a different outcome. And so was something guiding that? Did something prevent that? I can tell you there's so many times that I've been spared from disasters, accidents, what have you. I guess it's just not my time to go. It wasn't your time to go. What's guiding that? What's around that? Like, it is a huge mystery.
It is a huge mystery. And what we can say is that there are forces we don't understand. There's a lot we don't understand. We live in a very tiny fraction of the universe. And we have these big brains, which is the most complex thing we know of in the universe. And that brain is working all the time trying to figure things out.
Yeah.
And part of the problem of language, I've also studied linguistics, is that as soon as we label something, we're no longer experiencing it.
You could just stick that whole concept into religion right there.
Absolutely. Put a label on God, now it's fixed, and now I don't have to think about it anymore. Put a label on what's the right thing to do. That's the right thing to do. Now I don't have to think about it anymore. Thinking is hard work, which is why so few people engage in it.
Well, thinking is actually you're admonished not to think too much in religion, because that's a tool of Satan. Because then if you think too much, you become an intellectual. Critical thinking kind of goes out the window in favor of just feel good and warm and fuzzy, and that's how you know that this is right.
Yeah.
And
religions were built on these concepts, if this is our belief structure, this is what works for us. It worked for us in the past, so it's going to keep working for you as a child. It's like this is how the world works. Now, again, if in a stable society that's been around for thousands of years or hundreds of years, and it's worked pretty well, then why change it, right? The problem is that the world is changing.
And it hasn't worked well. We have too much divisiveness.
That's right.
I love this because it feels like, because so my programming kicked into gear and I'm like, oh, well, if you don't have an ascribed set of beliefs or doctrines about God, it diminishes God. When paradoxically, God is diminished when you put a label or whatever. It's like so threatening to not have a definitive, this is exactly what God is, to the church.
Yeah, it's threatening to the church, not to the individual who wants to get to know themselves or the universe or how to live in the world, in this world, rather than the world that was created when the religion was created. So yeah, it's very threatening to a church. It's very threatening to people who have strong beliefs. And the thing is that when you present facts to someone with a strong belief, they dig in deeper to their beliefs.
Yeah, they double down.
Right.
Yeah, I've seen that. So given the wealth of, and the depth that you've experienced in your life, and you called yourself shaman of the psyche, you have all these cool things you've done. What, if you could just pick like your top 3, I don't want to say tips or hacks or anything like that, but just things that you believe, and given what you've walked through and experienced and the journey that you're on now, what you've seen as you've worked with people and shared your story, what are like your top 3, I don't want to say practices or ways of being that you feel like are so pivotal to someone, let's just say experiencing God versus believing God?
Okay, you just expanded the question.
I know. Okay, well, let's just say everything's God. And so
good.
Every embodied experience is a way to connect to the divine, right?
Yeah, right.
So using the mechanism of the physical body, what have you found are some really profound and important ways to get that divine connection? If you want to label it that.
Sure. The first thing is to understand the nature of beliefs and how they work, and the psyche, and how our mind is created, basically, right? The fundamental underpinnings of our consciousness, of our life. And then to start examining your own beliefs in every area of life. And I have a little exercise called the belief self-diagnosis, which is in my ebooks, which I'm happy to give to people, so that you can begin looking at your beliefs and seeing what they're made of, and then figuring out which of these beliefs are really working for me. Leave those alone. They're great for you, right? No problem. Which are the beliefs that are neutral? Don't need to do anything about those. Which are the beliefs that are stopping me, preventing me from moving forward, limiting my experience? What do I want to do with those? Well, if I change those beliefs, it's like changing colored lenses, right? We look out through our belief structure, which is why it's so hard to recognize it, because it's like a transparent lens, and it filters reality to match our beliefs. So that's why we say beliefs create our reality. They actually shape, color, and form our perceptions. But when you start turning inward and examining that structure, then you have the opportunity to change it. And in my work, we have lots of ways of changing those beliefs at a fundamental level, down deep in the belief layer. And that's what we do. I train coaches and therapists and healers to do this methodology that I developed over 20 years of study.
Yeah. Where can our listeners find that? Where can they find you and your offerings?
First of all, my story is on my personal website, which is liongoodman.com, and it's under articles. My training program is called the Clear Beliefs Coach Training, and that's at clearbeliefs.com. and it comes at 3 levels, and you can take level 1 or 1 and 2 or 1, 2, and 3. That's a professional training for people who want to help others free themselves from their beliefs. And then we also have a coaching program called Clear Your Beliefs, and you can find that at clearyourbeliefs.com. So those are all places people can find out, depending on whether they want personal help, they want to become a professional, or they just want to learn more about Lion Goodman, whoever the alleged Lion.
Yeah, that I'm so glad you're doing the work that you're doing. I'm sure that's why you didn't die. I'm sure you know that. I love that it's actually very liberating to talk to someone like you who's had this really profound experience and who also like holds beliefs loosely, but also, again, paradoxically, they're everything because they, like you said, they shape and color everything. But it's like, we are more than our beliefs, right? We're not our beliefs.
It's so perfect that you said that, because all of our techniques in the Clear Beliefs method free people from, and by helping them see you are not your beliefs. You have beliefs, but you are not your beliefs. And that's the moment of awakening. That's the liberation.
Yeah.
That's the freedom.
It's also the undoing.
Really Sorry?
Like, it's also the undoing. Like, it's the moment of liberation, but then there's a whole process of unraveling and doing and dark night of the soul and everything. But yeah, it just gives me a lot of hope to talk to you. So thank you for your time today.
You are so welcome, Cherie. It's actually a great pleasure to be here. I'm so happy you invited me, and I'd be happy to come back anytime and talk.
I would love to have you back on because we got more to talk about. And remember that you are more than your beliefs, more than your stories, more than the programs, indoctrinations that were given to you. You cannot define yourself by anything on the exterior world. I won't comment on Lion's experience, only to say that he had something remarkable happen to him, something transcendental that allowed him to see and experience things very differently, as is the case with so many of us in this, as I have had my own kind of transcendental experience, which I am writing about right now and hoping to finish this book to come out in 2023. But when you have these kinds of experiences, you can't go back to sleep. You can't see things the same way. And in some ways, we're all kind of going through our own near-death experiences right now. We're all in transition, most of us, especially those who listen to my podcast. I know many of you are going through a death rebirth cycle. It can feel destabilizing, disorienting, but just know that the disillusionment does not have to be there when you are grounded and anchored in the belief that you are a part of all that is, and that you are safe, that you are right on target. Head over to standspeakshine.com if you want some more information on my course that has just been relaunched, Stand, Speak, Shine. Have a glorious week. We'll talk to you next time on Women Seeking Wholeness.